Well, g'day and welcome back to the shed for part 2 of this Pye Black Box model BBH. In part 1 I got the amplifier working after changing all the caps and a couple of valve sockets and gave the turntable a thorough service. It was in pretty good condition, it just needed a grease and oil change really. So in this part I want to finish the project off. I've got a little bit of work to do on the speakers, there's the cabinet, and I have to see if I can get an output from the cartridge. If not, I'll have to substitute something else to get it going. I've had some feedback about what I should do with the cabinet. I was thinking of perhaps painting it or doing something creative with it like that. I'm hedging towards keeping it original now. I always err on the side of originality, I suppose, when I can, and if in doubt, keep it original, I guess. But it's a good little amplifier. It's certainly a cut above the Dansets and typical portable record players of its time. It's got probably 6 watts output or something like that, compared to maybe 2 watts from a Danset. And it's a surprisingly well designed little amp. Starting from the output, it's got this dual gang volume pot, which had me confused for a little while, but it functions as a loudness control, effectively filtering out the higher frequencies as the volume is reduced. And then it goes to this phase splitter. I think I called it a phase inverter in the last video, which is, I knew what I meant, but I should get my terminology right. Feeds half the waveform to this output tube and half to that one. And we've got this great big output transformer with tappings. They call it an ultra linear output. I don't know exactly what that means. And a couple of great big speakers. All in all, that amounts to pretty good sound in the context of 1955 when this was made. It's certainly a cut above the Dansets and portable record players that were around at the time, and it gives you a sound probably comparable to a decent radiogram of the day. So all in all, a cut above the average for the time. So as I said, we've got a number of things to do, and I thought I'd kick off with the speakers. One of them's got a perfect cone in it, the other one not so good. That's the good one. Okay, so I want to look at just patching the insect damage around the edge of this cone. It still moves freely, doesn't need anything much, and it's surprisingly compliant. Got a lot of movement in it. I don't want to do anything to detract from that, so I'll have to be careful how I do this. Otherwise we'll lose some bass response. As I usually do for speakers, I'm going to use this liquid electrical tape. I'm running out of it actually, but I've got enough left I think for this job. It's good because it remains flexible. It shrinks down to a very thin flexible layer. So I'm going to try this with a little bit of tissue to cover the holes. I'm using just normal tissues. I believe tea bags are very good as well, but I'm not a tea drinker, so we don't have tea bags lying around. So I'll just put a little bit of this. This stuff's no good. That's more like it. We've got some more liquid stuff coming out now. I'll start with this one here. Just put a little bit on the cone and then a little piece of tissue. You don't want any more weight in this than you can help. You want to keep it thin and flexible as possible. That said though, I will just paint a little bit more of that over the top. I might let that dry first. And I'm going to go around the other holes and do a similar thing. For this larger section here, I've got a piece of old speaker cone that I'm going to cut up and put over that as a patch, because the contours on the edge of this will match the profile in here. I'll just see how that goes, but I think it will. Yep, that matches pretty closely the contour of the speaker, so I'll use that to patch that bit up because that's a tricky bit. The rest of them I'll just use tissue. Just putting on this piece of tissue around here. I'm using 1 ply of the tissues. These are 3-ply tissues and I've separated them into one single ply, and it's very, very thin. I think that should be all right. The thing about this record player is that the speakers don't have any protection against insect attack or anything, because they, the bottom of them actually pokes out through a slot cut in the bottom of the cabinet just to accommodate the depth of the speaker. They were obviously trying to get as much speaker into this cabinet as they possibly could. And there it is done. That will smooth off as it dries off. I held it up to the light. I can't see any pinholes of light coming through, so it should be okay. It's still got an insect nest in the back here. I'll have to clean that out. But other than that, it should be fine. I'll just clean up this corrosion around here and maybe give it a coat of clear lacquer or something to stop it from coming back. It's obviously been in a damp environment at some point. Okay, well that's the speakers done at least. And I've started on the turntable trying to see if I can get a signal through from the pickup. Not winning so far. I spent half the morning soldering up these fiddly little wires that connect under the little plugs on the back of the cartridge. I've got continuity through them. I've buzzed it all out. It works fine. It's got continuity. And I've got the scope hooked up to the plug here to see what sort of output I've got. And I'll show you what sort of output I've got. Absolutely nothing. Not a sausage. There's nothing coming out of this cartridge at all. So I've been looking around through what I've got lying around in my junk boxes, and I come across this old Ronette cartridge. Now it is it's got a few issues. The turnover mechanism doesn't work. I don't know what it needs to happen there. Actually, that's coming off there. Yeah, okay. So this whole turnaround thing doesn't work. Someone, not me, has soldered some big lumpy wires onto the back of the cartridge here. It's a stereo cartridge and it's been they've been commoned up from mono, and it's a horrible job. But we'll just see if I'm getting anything out of it. If so, maybe I can make something work out of this. So just hooking the scope up to it. Well, it doesn't matter which one's earth, I suppose. Hook it up to there. And I'll just hold it on the record here. And we've got music coming out of it. So, this is a possibility. If I can fettle the mechanical problems with it, get it to turn over and sit properly in the head shell, then we might be on a winner here. I'll have to check the styluses too, see if they're okay. Hopefully they will be. I think these are available anyway. Okay, well the next challenge with this is to see if I can get the thing to operate as a turnover cartridge. And there's a little cam on the end of here which will make it latch in position. So I gather it needs a spring to allow that to press against the latch. See what I've got in my my box of wrong size springs. Okay, well I've rummaged through my box of springs and I found one that looks like it's about the right diameter. It'll have to fit over that shaft, and the other end will have to fit in here. and it presses the cartridge back against this cam. I thought from the start the spring would have to go in the front, but no, it doesn't work that way. So I've cut this to what I think is about the right length. That will go in there. And the cartridge, when I disengage it from my finger, will go through there and press against that spring. Gee, I'm not winning here. It seems to work. That will go in there, and this little turnover piece here screws into the end. But here's the grub screw which goes into the end of that, and it's broken off, and it seems that it's broken off in the end of that shaft there, and I don't fancy my chances of either getting another one or getting this out. I could try and get it out, I suppose, but it's so small it's really difficult to work with. I do have a 1mm bit for the Dremel. I suppose as a last resort I can try and drill that out. There's nothing to lose because I can't use it otherwise. Oh, pretty rough, but I managed to drill a hole through it. I'm kind of hoping that I can now get some kind of screw through the end of this, and make it work. Okay, could be we're getting desperate here, but having drilled a 1mm hole in it, I found a 1mm thick panel pin, and I've filed it down so it will just press through the hole. It needs a little bit of force to press it through, but that's probably a good thing. So if I can cut that, the next thing will be to cut this to length and press it in to the little plastic end, and hopefully it will be strong enough to hold it in place. I think it should be. It'll be stronger than that little thing anyway. Although this is only mild steel, of course, that may have been hardened steel. It drilled out okay, so probably not. Alright, so let's see how we go with this. Okay, so having cut that to length, the end of it's a bit burnt. I'm just going to have to file it off because it won't fit through the hole. Well, I did a little bit of Googling. I found that there were some numbers printed on the bottom of this, and this says SA075. So I found out this is the LP stylus. I couldn't find much information on the SA750, which is on the other side, but I presume that is the one for 78s. So with LP showing, we want this one down. So it's a matter of just pressing the little modified nail into the hole. Right. Now, without dropping this on the shed floor, this needs to go in there and press through the hole. And it seems to have done that, sort of. Wiggling it a bit, and it seems to be going in. I'll get a pair of pliers and just press it in a little bit further. I scratched that a bit, but it seems to be well and truly in. Yep. Yeah, that's not fractured or anything. I've just put a scratch on the end. I'll clean that up, and it won't be noticeable. But it seems to work. 33, 78. That seems quite firm. I'll just put a little drop of super glue down there or something to hold it, perhaps JB Weld, although it's grey. I don't want it to be grey. Oh, look, what the hell. Whatever works best. I'll put super glue down it, I think. Now, the next question, do I risk desoldering this mess of wiring, or do I try and hook the clips up to the stumps of this wire? I'm not too sure which way to go with this. Well, I've got the cartridge mounted, that's a start, but in trying to put the little clips onto the back of those pieces of wire that were soldered to the back of the cartridge, I broke one of the clips off, and it's only taken me half a day to get that thing soldered on. The clip is, that's the clip. I've managed to strip some wire after considerable effort, but this wire will not take solder. So I'm going to try putting some rust converter, this is basically oxalic acid, onto the wire to try and clean it up with a cotton bud. Let's just see if I can get a little bit of solder to take on this. No. I dragged this old scrap turntable off the tip, and I've managed to salvage a couple of connectors out of it. There's another two on there I can pinch if I need to. Just goes to show no matter how crappy something is, there's always something useful in it. So let's see if I can push these on. I've tried to desolder these without getting them too hot. I'll just try and press them on. They seem to be about the right size, so come on, there we go, that's on. I've also cleaned these out with rust converter, and now I'll try and solder the end of this onto them. Well, it doesn't look like much, but I'm very pleased to see this. That's looking good. That should be enough output to drive the amplifier too. The connections under the cartridge are still a bit tenuous, though. I'm scared to touch them, but I might see what I can do to make them a bit more secure. Might end up even just running new wires to that thing, because those old ones are just impossible to solder to. So here we go. I've got the amp plugged in. I've got everything plugged into it. I've got the speakers over here. Let's just see if we get anything. Sounds good. I doubt if this would get me into trouble with copyright. I hope not. They're desperate if they ping me for copyright on this. Well, it's the middle of winter, but it was a sunny day when I brought the cabinet outside to start working on it. Now it's started to rain. I thought I would start by giving it a good clean up and a polish, and I've just rubbed this down with superfine steel wool, and I'm just giving it a polish off. It's coming up okay. There are a few little dents and, well, marks in the chips in the lacquer, which I'll have to do something with. I'll probably touch them in with a little bit of wood stain and a shellac. It is a shellac finish, so They're reasonably forgiving. If this doesn't work, if I'm not happy with it, then I guess I'll strip it back and refinish it, but I'd rather not if I don't have to. I don't really want to over restore it, and if I can get it looking half decent without refinishing it, I certainly will. And it's coming up okay. A lot will depend on how well I can deal with these little chips in the edges and things. Hopefully they'll be all right though. We've got this walnut stain here, proof tint, and I'm just going to try touching in some of the chips with it. Just using a cotton bud. I'll try that one there. It seems to be making a difference, but it might need a couple of coats, I think. And then I'll just go over this with a little bit of shellac. Go along these marks here. That's covering quite well now. Need a little bit more on the cotton bud, I think. I'll go over the sides as well, of course, although most of the marks are on the front. Just touching in the back of the cabinet here, it's got a few scuffs on it, but this proof tint is working quite well. I think it'll only need just a dab of shellac over it, not thick enough to dry to any great thickness. If it leaves any raised edges, I can always rub them off with fine steel wool and just give it probably I'll just give it a coat of wax. I think that should be sufficient. That's looking pretty good. I'm not sure what this hole is for here. I guess this one here will be for the cord. I don't recall any control or anything coming out here, so I don't know what that's all about. Well, the cabinet seems to be coming up reasonably well. At least for now, I think I'll be satisfied with the finish. I may redo it later if I'm bored enough. But I'm looking at the inside of the lid, and it has this felt strip along the edge and along the front, which is badly moth-eaten. Now, I have this felt that I bought from China for doing turntables, but somehow they got the measurements wrong, and it's one long strip, not wide enough to do a turntable unless it's a very small one. So I may as well use it for this. I'll have to order some more. It's not quite the right colour, but it's probably good enough. In any case, I'm going to use it because this is not much good. So I'm just going to cut a 10mm strip of this and take this off the edge and glue it on. So how will that go? Okay, I'll just smooth that off a bit and glue it on. That should look alright, I think. I've just cleaned the rust off the speakers. I had treated it with rust converter, and that neutralised it, but they were looking pretty rusty, so I've packed them up, masked them, and given the baskets a spray. I know it's not original, but they were looking pretty crappy, so I've covered any printing or anything on it, and that's peeled off there a bit, doesn't matter. So just tack the wires back on and we'll be in business. Well, the cabinet's looking pretty good after a good clean and polish. It's not perfect, but I think it's good enough. And so I'm going to start fitting the speakers back into it. I've given them a good clean. The speaker grill cloths were quite marked. You can see the dark patches in them where they were exposed to light or dirt or whatever. Easy solution to that. I'm going to turn them over. The inside looks quite good. A very coarse string-like material. Just replacing the grill cloth and speaker baffles. They just go in there, and the grill cloth is trapped between the baffle and the casing in such a way that it can't move at all, so that's handy. It seems a very well constructed cabinet, I'd have to say. Even the inside is varnished, I suppose, to prevent moisture getting into it and stopping the wood from warping. And along the top here it's got a piano hinge, which is another thing you don't often see on cheaper cabinets. Everything about it is good quality. It's just a very plain style. But it is starting to grow on me. I'm starting to kind of like it. As I think I mentioned before, the speakers in this actually sit below the bottom of the cabinet. They hang out this slot. I've obviously tried to get the biggest speakers possible into it. Anyway, let's just put them in, all wired up and ready to just plug into the amplifier. Now, I guess that goes probably facing this way. There we go. I noticed that this has a small label here which says royalty has been paid on this apparatus pursuant to a license agreement with the grantors of the Broadcast Sound Receiver License, known as A7S, authorising the use of certain British and Aryan letters of patent. Now, the strange thing is, nothing unusual about seeing these on a UK set, except this is not a radio, this is a record player. So rather curious that it required a radio license. Now, I know these record players did come with a companion tuner which sat underneath the cabinet. I believe they're quite rare, but I wouldn't have thought that a standalone record player would require a radio license. Anyway, something for others to work out, I don't know. I pulled the old cartridge apart just by drilling out the rivets, partly to see what was inside, and partly, I suppose, in the forlorn hope that there might be something salvageable, but I don't think there's anything salvageable in this. It's probably seen better days, but at least I know what happens to these things and why they tend to not work. This must be the remains of the crystal element. It's just turned to mush. Yep, nothing salvageable about that. Well, it's pretty much back together. I've just got to put in these two boards at the side here, which cover in the tops of the speakers. But it's turned on. We'll see how it goes. It's certainly working, but that sounds terrible. No bass, quite sharp and harsh in the treble. I don't know if it's this cartridge. I tried several different ways of wiring up the stereo to mono. I can try it another way, see what it does. I notice this doesn't have any compensation network on it, but it didn't have one when I got it, and I imagine that the amp itself, I'll have to have another look at the schematic, but probably manages that within its tone control circuitry. So I don't know where to go from here. I can try another cartridge in it, perhaps, see what that does. I've rechecked all the connections on the cartridge, and it's just wired with the two ground or negative together and the two positives together. I don't know if that's a recommended way of doing it, although I've read on a couple of forums that that's the thing to do. There was some discussion about wiring them negative, positive, so you have the two stereo elements in series. I tried that, sounded terrible. I'll see if this makes any difference now, but I don't hold out much hope. No, not really. Doesn't sound any better than it did before, lacking in bass. It could just be a crappy cartridge. I don't know much about this Ronette cartridge that I put in it. I don't even remember where I got it from. It's been rattling around in my parts box for quite a while. I might try another cartridge in it. I've got two options. I've got this Chinese one, which may work. The only problem with that is that there's no way of mounting it in this head shell. I would have to make something up. And of course it doesn't turn over, so it won't play 78, so part of the functionality would be lost. The other thing is this one, which is another stereo cartridge, which I bought as a lot of cartridges a little while ago. It's my last remaining ceramic cartridge or crystal cartridge. It is a turnover one, it's stereo. I can try wiring that in and see if it does the job or not. Of course, the other thing I could do is try and build a compensation network, just a cap and a resistor or whatever, to try and compensate for the RIAA curve, I believe it's called, the compensation curve used for recording vinyl records. The thing that gets me about that, though, is that there wasn't anything like that separately in this machine. I put it back together the way it came, and presumably the way it's been operating up till now. So it beats me. Just looking at the circuit diagram here, there's C1, which runs through the 1 meg pot to ground through R3. R3 is 39k, so at minimum volume that would be 39k to ground through that cap, and up to 1 meg to ground. So that would form the compensation network. Well, I've stuck the wires on this little Chinese cartridge, and I've got no way of holding it in, of course, but I'll see if I can get any sound out of it and see if it sounds different. Just holding it between my thumb and fingers here. Easier said than done. That sounds a lot better. So it looks like maybe that Ronette cartridge wasn't much good. The next thing I'll try is my precious last stereo cartridge. I'll put that in. At least it will mount properly to it. And I'll keep the Chinese one for a last ditch desperate solution. Okay, well, I fitted the new stereo cartridge in here. I just turned it on. I'll wait for it to warm up for a minute and see what happens. Well, that seems to be sounding a great deal better. Plenty of volume for sure, bit of needle torque going on there. Alright, well, I guess I'm going to have to sacrifice my last stereo cartridge to this. Hopefully it's a worthy sacrifice. I don't know. Anyway, I'll put it back together. I need to touch up this scratch I just put on the top of the tone arm, trying to change the cartridges. It just rubs against this stay here. On first impressions, that doesn't sound too bad, so I think we might be okay now. Well, it's working pretty well, I'd have to say. I'm not overly happy with the sound from the crystal cartridge that I put in it. I never did like stereo cartridges wired for mono. They don't seem to sound quite the same. But these black box record players have a reputation for a reason, I suppose. And it does sound quite good, especially in the context of the time it was made in the mid-50s. So I'm going to call this finished for the time being. However, I have a few other plans for it. I may still paint the cabinet. I'm fairly happy with the way it polished up, but it does have a few blemishes in it. It's not perfect. Not that I'm that much of a perfectionist, but I do like things to look nice when they're done. And the other thing is I might fit Bluetooth to it. Now, I've been watching a channel called Electronics Old and New by Manuel Caldera. I guess everyone knows him. And he has fitted Bluetooth modules to a lot of the radios he's done. And I thought I'd give that a go. So I ordered some printed circuit boards from PCB Way. He designed these himself and they've arrived. I've got 10 of these. I think I got 10 boards for $5, which sounds good, but of course if you want them anytime soon, living in Australia, you've got to pay for the postage, and the postage I think was about $40 all up. So not that astonishingly cheap, but still it's pretty good value. And I also got 10 of these little Bluetooth receiver modules, and so I'm going to make up 10 printed circuit boards, and the rest of the components I should be able to source locally. The caps, the resistors, the op amps. The only thing I'm having trouble finding is there's a DC to DC converter in there which isolates the power supply to prevent hum, and I can't get them locally, so I'm going to have to order them from overseas and wait and pay again. Everything you order from overseas here takes quite a while to get here unless you're willing to pay. This record's a case in point. It's a rather nice one actually, Billie Holiday, in pretty good condition, and I think I paid about $40 for it, but by the time I got it, it cost me well over $100, so there you go. If you want it, you have to pay for it. So I hope you've enjoyed these 2 videos about this Pye Black Box record player. It was going to be one video, but it turned out to be a lot more trouble than I thought it was going to be. That's the way of things. Sometimes the simplest things give you the most trouble. But I hope you've enjoyed these, and I've got a couple of radios coming up next. They're both Philips, unfortunately, but we won't talk about that now. And so I hope you can join me in the shed for those, and thanks for watching, and I'll leave you with a little bit of Billie Holiday if I don't get pinged for copyright.